Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first lecture. So prior to this, maybe you checked out a little bit about me or a little bit about this course videos. That's great. If you haven't, check those out afterwards. Today, we're just going to dive through a little bit of the basics about this course and then also discuss why in the world we're here taking this course, and then follow it up with some foundational terms and just getting us all on the same page. Whenever we talk about the human body, we need to have a direction. We need to have a visualization or the ability to visualize where we're referring to on the human body. We're going to discuss more about that. So first of all, if you watched that other video, you probably saw where I reviewed this, but I'm just going to drive this home. You do not have to buy a book for this course. Everything that you need to know is going to be provided on Blackboard. You have the course syllabus. Make sure you are paying attention to the due dates and to the calendar that is listed on the final page. Any course handouts, like the diagrams that you'll have to fill out and turn in, lecture PowerPoints, those guys are going to be the wealth of knowledge that you need to pass your exams and your quizzes. And then our form of lab practicums now is going to be a journal article summary. So you're going to be picking up journal articles and summarizing them over a topic of your choice. I don't want you to worry about memorizing a book. That is not the point of this course. I want you to be able to understand concepts, apply them, start to discuss them, and really have a broader understanding and a better ability to apply the knowledge that you've learned to real life versus just vomiting out something on an exam and then forgetting about it. So let's just break down what kinesiology means, because if you're taking this course, Applied Anatomy and Kinesiology, you're going to need to understand the fact that we aren't just memorizing terms. Yes, we will discuss terms, but we're talking about how the body, the structure, does the things it does, how it can do the movements it does, and be successful in those movements. So let's break down kinesiology. It's from Greek, and it ultimately broken down means to discuss movement, which is exactly what we're going to do with this course. Granted, this is now a fully online course, but that is why I love to offer the Tuesday night office hours. Join us. Let's discuss these concepts. Let's dive deeper into the things you want to. That way you get the most out of this course, because ultimately this is a great course to help you synthesize and dive into things that you might want to do later on in life. So take advantage of this. Have a discussion. Parts of the human body. There are two major body segments and divisions in the body. It's going to be axial and appendicular. Axial means everything in the midline, except for the pelvis. So the head, the neck, the trunk, meaning the spine, everything in the central aspect is going to be axial, versus appendicular is going to be referring to everything else. So the upper body, the lower body, and the pelvis included. Mapping the human body, we need to have a way to express what we're seeing or what we want clients to see or what we want another health professional to understand. We need to be able to paint a picture for them, describing where maybe the problem lies or what is occurring. So for positional terminology, I want you to think about, it's kind of like north, east, south, west. So the direction, the broad terms, versus directional, it's going to get specific. It's going to be like bullet point, here's the corner of Peoria and 11th Street. Okay, it's very, very specific. You know exactly where you're looking for something. Okay. So talking about positional terminology, let's start with the basics. Anatomical position is the starting point for many things whenever we discuss the human body, whenever we discuss movement. And I'm a yoga teacher, so this actually means even more to me because We start a lot of our asanas in what's called mountain pose or Tadasana, okay? This is just your palms facing forward, standing up straight, arms down by your sides, you're facing forward, toes forward, everything faces forward. Because what now we can do is, now that we understand where everything's facing, say I have somebody lay supine on the ground. That means that they're laying face up, palms up, face up, toes up, all the things. Versus prone is going to be laying face down on your nose. Okay, toes down towards the ground, everything facing down. This is important because there's actually different exercises that even I prescribe to clients or patients, such as a supine liftoff or supine 90-90 drill. That means that I'm going to be having that person on their back versus a prone drill, like a prone pushback, prone push-pull. These are going to be where I have that individual on their belly. So again, it starts to help you visualize what that individual or what we want that individual to look like. But it's just a very broad, right? Like up, down, facing forward, all those things. Whenever we start to discuss a directional terminology, this gets very specific. And just to kind of reinforce these points that we discussed, I've embedded a YouTube video into this PowerPoint for you to go back to, go read, go watch. It's going to just bring these terms to life in a very interactive way. Medial means closer proximity to the midline versus lateral means further proximity to the midline. So basically closer to the center of your body versus further out. So you can already see if I say, yes, this individual has a laceration to the lateral part of her lateral malleolus. Okay, so for me, that means, okay, I'm looking on the outside of her outer ankle bone. Got it. Or she has a bruise on the medial portion of or her inconius. Okay, so I'm going to be looking there. So again, it just dials us in. Instead of just, okay, they're face up, face down, I'm getting a lot more detail. And because we're in the medical field, we like to use words that mean the same thing. We make a bunch of different words that mean the same. So for medial, you might hear somebody say the ulnar side or the tibial side. These are bones that are more medial versus radial or fibular. These are more lateral structures. So again, laterally meaning in the body, pushing towards the outside, away from the midline. Here's a few more. Anterior versus posterior. This one's kind of self-explanatory. Anterior means the front side of the body. Posterior means towards the back side of the body. Again, some words that mean the same thing. Anterior includes ventral or volar. So the anterior portion of maybe the hand and wrist versus posterior, dorsal. I always think of this one like the dorsal fin on the shark. So the back fin, the back side of the body, if that helps you, great. If it doesn't, disregard, but hopefully that helps paint a picture. Superior versus inferior. This means a designation of one position as above another versus below another. So think about like your superior at work versus your inferiors at work, or the people who are underneath you. So the person who is above you in pay, in stature, and whatever you want to say, versus inferior. So they are underneath you in pay, they're underneath you in responsibilities, whatever the case might be. Hopefully that helps to paint a picture as well. Proximal versus distal. This designates one position as closer in proximity to the axial skeleton than the other. So proximal means that it's closer towards the midline versus distal means it's farther away. It's a distance. It's at a distance. So a good way to say this is she had a laceration at the distal portion of her lower leg. And I could even get more specific and more descriptive and say the young lady had a anterior distal laceration of her lower leg. Now you know that it's on the inside and the most far away portion of her lower limb. We can also go into the aspect, laterally, medially, just all, again, paints a picture. Last one, superficial versus deep. This just means that something that is more closer to the surface versus deep means something that's more deep. It's internal. So external versus more internal. Now, here's some more positional terms that you need to know. These guys are important because the planes of the body help to divide our body into sections. And these will also correspond to the axes of movement. So let's just first break down the planes, then we'll dive into the axes of movement and we'll just lay it all out there. So sagittal is the imaginary plane, again, imaginary, that divides the body into left and right. There's also something called mid-sagittal, which means that that is directly in the middle of the body, just slicing straight through your nose. But usually we refer to it as sagittal because it can be anywhere left or right along the body. Coronal is dividing the body from anterior to posterior, so slicing you through the middle. Or forward and back. No matter, it doesn't have to just be in the middle. Horizontal plane or transverse plane is dividing you from superior to inferior, again, up and down the body. We have, of course, to throw a little bit of complication in this and say oblique plane, because this just means that we are having components of 2 or 3 of different planes. And we'll talk about an example of that later. Now, maybe you pause, maybe you rewind this and you watch everything that I just said again. Because here's what it kind of has to challenge you just a little bit. We're going to have to think outside the box. You're going to have to think a little bit more 3-dimensional, okay? So grab a drink of water. Let's go. Axis. This is a point at which rotation occurs around. Think about a globe. You have an axis point shaft that is driving straight through the globe, and then the rotation occurs around this axis. For each of the cardinal planes, there's a corresponding axis that is perpendicular to the plane. So if the plane is, say, a transverse plane, it's going left and right, guess what? Its axis will be in the perpendicular position. So let's break this down. Again, I have a video to go along with it, so bear with me here. Here we go. Movement that occurs in the frontal plane. Which one was that? That's dividing you from anterior to posterior, yes? We'll have an axis that is positioned anterior to posterior. Ooh. So remember, the frontal plane cuts you in half, separating the anterior portion of your body from the posterior. The axis is going to be slicing straight through you, driving from anterior to posterior. So this is kind of crude, but bear with me here. Just like in all the medieval shows, whenever somebody stabs the brave knight through the stomach with a sword, that's going anterior to posterior. I know. Maybe that's a warning right before I say that, and I apologize, but you get that picture, right? Yes. So that axis is that sword going straight through, and the occurring of movement is going to be in that frontal plane if that axis is anterior to posterior. Movement that occurs in the sagittal plane will have an axis position medial to lateral. So if the movement is occurring, I always think of like a bike wheel. So think about how a bike wheel is rotating towards us. So we're like looking straight on at the bike. The bike is coming towards us. We're looking at the wheel. The motion, the wheel is turning in the sagittal plane. But the axis, the point in the middle of the bike, is going left to right or medial to lateral, a horizontal axis. And then, of course, we have the transverse plane, and the axis is going to be positioned superior to inferior. Now think about that same bike analogy. Just like we all did whenever we were kids, we kind of throw over a bike. We did not use the kickstand because that was overrated, right? We just threw the bike over, it's on its side. Well, now that wheel is in the transverse plane. It's spinning along almost like perpendicular or parallel to the ground. Whereas the axis is going to be perpendicular and it's actually pointing straight up and down towards the sky and the ground. So superior to inferior. Hopefully that helps paint a picture. I have a beautiful, beautiful YouTube video embedded in here for you to watch. It is old school, but it is this goofy little Gumby character, but it really does help you visualize these movements as well as the axes and the planes. So normally, if we were in person, I'd be getting volunteers, but let's just break down a few of these movements together, and that way we can get a general understanding. Let's do a head nodding no. So whenever you just do this with me, I'm doing it here in my seat. I'm saying no with my head. I am moving my nose left to right. Yes? My face is going left to right. What plane would that be in? What plane of movement would that be in? Transverse, right? Because we're going left to right. You want to think of it as medial to lateral. I think it more along the horizontal axis, just like horizon if we're drawing a line with our nose. And then our axis would be perpendicular, right? Well, in this case, our spine is the axis. It's going up and down, superior to inferior. And that is what our head is rotating around. Everybody see that? Feel that? Next up is going to be jumping jacks. So that's where your arms go up overhead as your leg goes out to the side, and then you return back to standing. Jumping or not. So what movement, what plane is that movement in, for starters? Frontal, because you're going out laterally and then back medial. Yes? What direction would the axis be going in? Remember, it has to be perpendicular. It's going anterior to posterior, yes? That's basically our core, our trunk is the axis. Now, just to confuse y'all, just to make you think a little bit outside the box, think about a basketball layup. Remember how I said that we like to confuse things and make things a little bit more complex? Yeah. And I talked about that oblique plane where it combines different corresponding planes in one movement. Think about a basketball layup. Whenever somebody's dribbling up, they're going forward as they're taking their arm out to the side, and then they swoop forward and into the bucket. Yes? So think about how we were going sagittally, then suddenly our arm was going transversely, and then it was going kind of obliquely up and over, and then sagittally maybe into the bucket. See how that can kind of start to infuse all these together? All right, so that is the end of lecture 1. Go rewatch this, go watch those embedded YouTube videos. They're very, very helpful. And join us Tuesday as we discuss maybe a little bit more. I'll answer questions. Hopefully this was informative. It's not the most invigorating topic, but it gets us on the same playing field and same understanding of the topics and the vernacular and the terms that we need to understand moving forward.